My name is Jeff Bulmer. I'm part of the Academy of Death Racers, and I am here with Lina Kalcheva, the director of Other Half. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this.
So first off, thank you for submitting to the Academy of Death Racers Festival. I watched this. I think I've seen it 2 or 3 times now. I watched it for the first time yesterday, and it was very good. I liked it a lot. There were a lot of things that really stood out to me about this. The first one is, obviously, this is a short set in the world of Greek mythology, and I wanted to know what drew you to Greek mythology.
It's something that I've always been really interested in. It's a lot of stories I grew up with as a child. I think the thing that really kind of made us want to set the story in this kind of world was initially the idea came from we were talking about kind of relationships and codependent relationships and how we can physically represent something like that in an interesting way. And then we were talking about different references about how there can be a physicality and a physical way to represent something like that. And we talked about a bit from Plato's Symposium, which talks about the origin of love, which is that originally we were kind of double people with two heads and 2 sets of limbs, and we were too powerful. The gods split us apart. They were trying to find our other, and so we thought that's a really great metaphor for exploring relationships rather than just us looking for each other, what it looks like when we come back together. And yeah, it just seemed like a really rich way to do it. And then on top of that, we wanted it to be a kind of coming of age, maturing, that kind of film, and that really coincided with the like hero's journey quest narrative that is also really common in mythology. So it all kind of made sense together.
All right. Thank you for going through that myth as well, because I have a lot of questions specifically related to it, and now we have a brief summary.
Awesome.
So thank you. The very first thing that jumped out to me right as I was watching this is you start this off with the main character Ren watching a play version of that myth from Plato's Symposium. And it reminded me a lot of, in a lot of those Greek myths and also plays, the epic poems, they'll always start with an invocation to the muses. And I was wondering if like that's where you got that idea, or otherwise just, why did you decide to start the short off that way?
Well, this was the thing that changed the most times while we were making the story. But it always had to do with some kind of way that shows how love and relationships are really idealized in their society and how it's kind of the main goal. And that was always through art in some way. So at one point he was in a museum, at one point he was in a temple, in a gallery, in a library. But it was always had to do with him kind of admiring and yearning for this thing, this ideal that he hasn't gotten in life so far. And then, yeah, but nothing was quite working. And then it was my screenwriter that came up with the idea of it being a play, and it all just clicked exactly because of what you said and the role that theater and muses and kind of singing and all of that has a place in that time that we've kind of set our world in.
So I've got a lot of questions related to specifically which myths you draw from. I'm probably going to ask these in parts. The first one is, why did you decide specifically to bring in the characters of Narcissus, Icarus, and Medusa as your as sort of the main characters that Ren has to interact with?
Well, so we at first they weren't directly tied to the myths. That kind of like came later and made sense a little bit later. I think the one that we always called Narcissus was the first one, because of, it's really obvious, like all the mirrors and kind of self-absorption. And then and the other, there was an extra one originally, but we all wanted them to be kind of archetypes of toxic relationships that are, even though we borrow a lot from mythology, as things that you can relate to now, today. So we spoke just a lot about our previous relationships and relationships that we've seen from people we know, and kind of identifying some kind of common things that you force yourself to change for someone in one way or another. And yeah, Narcissus seemed like a really obvious one and was always called Narcissus. And then the other two, kind of as soon as we tied them to these mythological characters, oh, this one kind of reminds me of Medusa, because of all the kind of stone element in the head, and like kind of manipulation, and kind of the way he kind of has to face himself in order to defeat her. And yeah, Icarus was just this kind of like elusive being that you're just chasing, but they're never really gonna be there for you.
Related to those last two, I think it's it makes a lot of sense that Narcissus was always more or less Narcissus.
Yeah.
But the other two, I thought it was really interesting that you were using Icarus and Medusa as ideas of toxic relationships, because in their respective myths, they're parts of cautionary tales, but depending a little bit on the telling, they're usually the victims of their own cautionary tales. So I thought it was interesting how you used them here as sort of quote unquote villains.
Yeah, well, to be fair, Narcissus is a bit of a cautionary tale in a way, although it is 100% his fault in the, the original story. Yeah, I think I quite enjoyed tying the thing to Icarus, because even though Icarus is the character, the one who is really kind of flying too close to the sun is Ren in that scenario. And other than in the credits, no one really says their names in the story. But yeah, I always found yeah, I mean, Medusa is definitely a victim in the original story, but I think it was just, I don't know, there was something about, we came up with the character from kind of right before we came up even with the whole story. It was like, oh, if this is a world where people merge when they're together, what if there's someone who just keeps absorbing people and kind of oppressing them and keeping them as some kind of like accessory. And then yeah, we got really into that as a concept, as a concept, and then tying that to Medusa just kind of got a bit exciting thematically, to put it in this kind of underwatery, kind of murky, drowning place. And specifically with kind of him turning to stone, I think that was the real tie in there, where he gets kind of absorbed by her.
Actually, that isn't, you mentioned something that's another thing that I realized. I read the description, and that's where I realized that the main character's name was Ren, but no one actually says their names in this short.
No.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, we didn't, we just didn't, it didn't seem necessary really to have a name. It's good for us because we know who we're talking about. And I think a part of it was because a lot of it for me had to do with I wanted all the characters to be kind of genderless. And I thought we don't really need names. If someone gets the reference, that's cool. But I think, yeah, we never really say anything gendered in the whole film, really. So that was kind of a part of the reason. I just really wanted everything to feel universal, especially because we're dealing with kind of archetypal figures. I feel like as soon as you assign like a specific gender, it's different. It's like, oh, this is a manipulative woman, or this is a manipulative man. And it just has a different connotation where I feel like they're really universal experiences and gender doesn't really matter.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was actually one of my other questions. Most of the characters in this, I wouldn't even say most, all of the characters in this short are essentially gender neutral in terms of coding and how they're, shown, etc. Clearly that was a conscious choice.
Yeah.
I wanted to know sort of how you approached that. Was there any version of this that wasn't gender neutral, and really what kind of led you to that specific, not specific, to that decision to sort of keep it as gender neutral as possible?
I think as soon as it's something that is kind of important to me just in my, I don't know, in my life and in my work, that I try not to tie things in to gender when it comes to relationships very much, because it doesn't really do anyone any good, at least in my experience. And I think as soon as it kind of is really easy with animation, I feel like, oh, it's set in another world, the rules don't apply, I can just make it however I want. And because it was this really, it felt important because it was kind of a mythological narrative, it's all archetypal figures, and I thought it was a good opportunity to just really not care about that. And I found it really nice that when I talk to people about the film, sometimes people talk about Ren as a boy, and sometimes they talk about Ren as a girl, and I just go with whatever whatever people say, because that's how I see them as well. I tend to say more he, just because I think about the voice actor.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of casting, for example, we just said anyone could send us a tape for any of the characters that they want. We just kind of did it based on who sounded right. So for example, with Medusa, because it's Medusa, we naturally just got quite a lot more women that sent stuff. But yeah, the voice actor who played Medusa was just so perfect. He just he did a fantastic job. And same with Icarus, we got a lot more men, I think. But in the end, we went with a female voice actor.
I did want to ask about the voice acting.
Mm.
This short features, among others, Dylan Edwards and Ivana Lynch as
Yes.
voices. My first question, what was it like? What was the process of casting well-known voice actors like this, and what was it like to work with them?
It was incredible. First of all, I think this is my grad film at school. So being able to work, and it was only the second time I worked with voice actors at all. The first one was an exercise at school. So it was just like unreal to be able to work with them. And I was so really touched that they were interested in the project. So with my producer, we thought, I mean, let's give it a go. Let's think of who we can think of for these roles, and just reach out. And if they happen to like it, they'll get back in touch. And it just so happened that for a few of them, we heard back, and it was amazing. And yeah, with Ivana Lynch, we worked together 2 times. We did like a Zoom recording initially, and then like a proper recording right at the end. And with Dylan Edwards, we just did one right at the end. But yeah, they were both incredible. It was a little intimidating for me because I was directing like really experienced, like incredible actors, but they brought so much to the roles, and it was really, really exciting.
I guess building off of what you said, this is only your second time working with voice actors.
Yeah.
Was this short originally envisioned with voice actors as well?
Well, right at the so there's not that many lines in the film. They're all quite specific, kind of to the point things. There's not a lot of like banter and dialogue. And initially we did conceptualize it as a silent film, and then I think we started adding, I think in the beginning maybe there was one line per character. And then when we saw it come together, those lines helped so much, and then we kind of started having a bit more fun with it. And yeah, there was also a time that we thought we were gonna all make it in an alien language and have subtitles, which my sound designer and I were really excited about, but we got shut down by we got convinced otherwise by the rest. And I'm glad, because I managed to have this like amazing experience to direct voice actors saying actual words.
Mm-hmm. Not to dwell too much on a version of the short that doesn't exist, but the alien version with a language that doesn't exist, would that still have been so rooted in Greek mythology?
Yeah, 100%. It was just when we knew what, we knew what the lines were, but when we kind of started talking about casting, yeah, I was just talking to my who did we had my producer, myself, the sound designer, and the writer. We were all kind of going through the casting together. And yeah, I just kind of had like a random thought. I was like, what if it's a made up language? Because my favorite book, I don't know, my favorite thing is this really fat encyclopedia called Codex Seraphinianus, which is an encyclopedia for a world that doesn't exist, and it's all written in a made up language. And there's these tables and charts that seem like everything should make sense, but it doesn't. It's all nonsense. And I really love it. And I look at it whenever I kind of try to think of ideas. And yeah, I just had like, it's an alien world, we could do whatever we want. And I got a bit excited, but everyone was like, calm down.
Moving on to a slightly different topic a bit. Yeah. How did you animate this film? It's obviously all stop motion, but
the technique, you mean?
Yeah.
So it's a multiplane mostly, which is a so the camera is looking down, and there are several layers of glass. So there's a lot of forced perspective, fake shadows and stuff like that. But multiplane is traditionally flat. So you're working with paper cutouts or flat plasticine or things like that, where we had our sets be fairly more three-dimensional, and our characters being kind of semi-flat, sculpted on top. Then the characters themselves, they were plasticine sculpted, and then they were painted on top with oil paint. So I was animating resculpting them, and also animating the paint, so the eyes, the mouth. So that meant that every time the character had to turn their head like this, I would have to take off the whole face for every frame and resculpt it and repaint it and change the hair and do all of that. So intense. And there was a lot of kind of practical effects that we did, because I really wanted everything in camera, but I think partially because I really like in live action too, I really love kind of old-timey practical effects, and films like Jason and the Argonauts, which again is kind of mythological, and I like feeling like it's things that you can touch and that are there physically. So yeah, we had a bunch of things like the twinkling stars was like glitter with a shifting light, and the underwater effect was this like crazy device with rippled glass that we lit through that was kind of spinning like this to create the ripples. Yeah, stuff like that. It was a lot of really weird problem solving, because it was stuff that none of us had ever done before. But yeah, it was really exciting. It was a long production, so having to keep kind of coming up with solutions to problems was really cool, and it kind of kept me really engaged the whole time.
With the process you just described, it sounds like the scenes of Ren merging with the other characters must have been a nightmare to animate.
Yeah, I was a bit it was like definitely when I had one coming up, I would just lie awake at night like, I don't know how I'm gonna do that. Because it's not something you can really practice, because it takes a while to prepare the model. Also with the way that we did it, it meant that I was making new puppets for every scene, because the scale changes, everything changes. So yeah, I take quite a few hours preparing the like starting thing, and then once you go, you ruin it and you can't go back. Some of them have other movement, like the Icarus one has this rolling background because they're falling down, or the one with Narcissus, the camera's moving up and I had to reach like this between the set to like make them go. So yeah, no, they were intense, but they were actually really fun. I found you have, when it's more abstract, you have a lot more room for error. So as I kind of kept doing them, I found that it wasn't so scary. It's just about keeping track of the movements you're making, so it seems fluid. Yeah.
So how long did the production take in total?
So overall, from kind of concept to delivery, we started in November 2019 and we finished it March 2021 overall.
Wow.
And then the shoot was from June or July, I don't know, from June until February, so 8 months. Yeah, and this was on 2 units, and I was the only animator. I mean, I had this part-time assistant for a month, which was super helpful. She did most of the kind of catacomb, the cave of faces and Medusa's hair, which was more that was only in stop motion. It wasn't on a multiplane, so it was upright like this. While I was doing other stuff, but it was mostly because of the technique we went with. It was so time consuming because the set had to be changed for every shot because we were building everything to camera. So we were kind of swapping around. So one set would be built and lit while I'm animating on the other side of the room, and then we would just swap. But it was quite a lot because obviously when the set is being built and lit, I still need to be there to help and to direct. While also having to do, I didn't sleep a lot for those months.
Well, I hope you're getting a little more sleep now.
Yeah, until the next production.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a few more general questions. Who would you say are your biggest influences as an animator, director, filmmaker, just in general?
Yeah. Well, there was the book I talked about. I really love that book. I wrote my
sorry, could you say the name of that book again?
Yes, it's called Codex Seraphinianus. Yeah, and it's kind of, I really love it because it kind of throws you into this world, and simultaneously, like, it has enough symbols in it that seem familiar. Like there's a tree, but when you cut it in half, it's an avocado, or it's kind of these people having sex, but then they merge and they turn into an alligator and it crawls away. And it's all presented like a textbook, like an encyclopedia. And it gives you kind of like just enough to enough familiarity to keep you engaged and not to be like this is completely abstract, but then it's always pulling away. There's like a lot of distance and it's making you feel like, well, this is not for you, you've just come across it. And I think it's just such an amazing way to present something fantastical, and kind of let you make your own meaning. It kind of invokes this feeling of just childhood and discovering the world for the first time, and not getting everything completely, but getting something and getting excited about it. Yeah, so there's the book. I really love that. I really love, in the same vein, kind of the La Planète Sauvage, which is the feature animation from the 70s. It's my favorite film, and it kind of has the same, not exactly the same. Obviously, there's a story, there's a narrator, but it kind of has that same feeling of kind of distance from the audience. You don't get the big, like, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, welcome to the world, here's exposition. You just kind of get thrown in and you have to figure it out. And it feels quite cold in a way, which I like. Just kind of untraditional, I think, way of doing fantasy, which I think is quite cool.
And I just remembered one other one other question about the short that I'll come back to in just a minute. But the first thing I
Okay.
wanted to ask you was, what is the experience? How's the experience been of shopping this film around to film festivals? Obviously, you guys are at the Academy of Death Racers Festival, but have you been to any other festivals as well?
Yeah, it's been this is the first film I've like really properly tried to go to festivals with. I think my previous grad film I sent to a few and I got into a few, but I wasn't, I didn't feel like it was at the level that I'm really gonna try for like the big ones.
Mhm.
And I'd never been to a film festival with my film, and then the first one we got into with other half was Cannes, which was amazing. And I got to go, which was a bit touch and go because of COVID, but I did manage to go. And it was just, yeah, an incredible experience. And there's been loads. We went to Sitges, which I had an amazing time with, and we won there. Uh, yeah, no, there's been loads. There was a few in America I didn't get to go to. We went to Chicago and Rhode Island. I managed to go to Holly Shorts in August, which was super fun. And my editor is American and lives in LA, so I got to see him again. Yeah, no, it's just been uh, incredible that it's my student film, and people have really resonated and with it and liked it. So it makes me really happy.
Did you get to see any good audience reactions?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it's so the vibe is so different at different festivals, I feel, and it really depends. It's really interesting how the program and like the film before your film and after
Mhm.
really make you see it differently. But yeah, I had really good reactions. I think one of the things that made me really happy is that a lot of kind of queer people came to talk to me about how much they liked the film and how much they liked that kind of representation that is just it's just there, and it's not discussed. It's not kind of being like it's specifically the film is specifically about that, but it's just the way it is. Because I really like stuff like that too, and I was really glad that it came through to that audience. And yeah, I've just enjoyed a lot of people saying I've had those exact relationships. I think that's been really gratifying.
So the last thing that I wanted to mention is
Mhm.
the end of the film.
Yeah.
Ren sort of emerges from the fountain as the four-armed being, but unlike in Plato's Symposium, she's only got the one face. It's just
Mhm.
her, which I don't know how to turn that into a question. That's really just more of an observation. Um, but yeah, I was wondering if you could speak to the ending a little bit and what you sort of wanted to what you sort of I guess what you sort of wanted to say with the ending.
Yeah. So it kind of, yeah, we introduced this kind of statue, the love deity, that we assume because we've seen all the audience in the theater and everyone else, we assume this is a unified being or a couple
Mhm.
that is kind of an ideal merged being, right? Which is what Ren is praying to. Um, and then who Ren ends up successfully merging with is their own kind of forgotten self, which is in that catacomb. So uh, when they're really, really tiny, kind of little shell of a being,
Mhm.
and they say they're sorry to the statue that is how they were before. Um, that's when they begin to merge, and they get the strength to crawl out of the hair and defeat Medusa. Um, and yeah, and then it was just a way to show that um, maybe what everyone assumes kind of love and completeness is wasn't that, because Ren ends up looking exactly like the creature from the fountain, um, which only has one head. So maybe it's been about acceptance and self acceptance and self love and finding that within yourself the whole time. And so yeah.
Well, that's all my questions I have for you. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you for these are really thoughtful questions. Yeah, so thank you.
Other Half is currently in competition for the Best Animated Short Film at the second annual Academy of Death Racers Festival. It is also eligible for our Audience Award, which can be voted on by any ticket holder. And the Academy of Death Racers Festival is currently running until January 22nd. Thank you once again, Lina Kalcheva, for this interview. And I hope everyone will check out Other Half. It's very good. I've liked it both of the times that I've seen it, and I plan to watch it at least one or two more.
Thank you so much.